please raise your hand. Using the raise hand function. Also, you can put something on the Q&A function, or and if that doesn't work, you can wave wildly with your camera on, and we'll try to notice that. To ensure that we're compliant with the sunshine law, please do not use the chat function. And as you noted, this meeting is being recorded. OPSD will draft meeting minutes from the recording and post for viewing. So today's meeting minute materials are posted on OPSD's Phase 2 update webpage. Has everybody found that, or great, okay. We're gonna go to call to order with roll call and check for quorum. So I'd like to, when I call your agency, with the task force member or designee, introduce themselves, and then identify if anyone else is present with you, as well as other individuals from your department in attendance. Task force members, please provide your full names and have your video on throughout the meeting to maintain a visible quorum. So, we'll start with the members. Department of Education. We have anybody here for Department of Education? No, it was still, yeah. For Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Present, Lena Alale. Sorry.
Oh, great. Thank you, Leonela. Appreciate that. And then for UHERO, is anyone here from UHERO? No. Representing DLNR, no, the Climate Change Commission. Michael?
Present. Michael Kane, present, representing DLNR. Am I also representing Climate Commission?
You might be.
I believe I'm the only one in the room from DLNR.
Yes. Okay. And then representing the also the Climate Change Commission co-chair. Do we have anybody from? No, for Chris Lear. All right. For the Hawaii County Economic Development Board, Jackie is Jackie.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, terrific! Thank you. And then so that was Jackie. Is Jackie Hoover. Jackie Hoover is excused. She's pouring damage in Kailo Kona. For the Maui County Economic Development Board.
Hi, Leslie, present.
Thank you, Leslie. For the Oahu Economic Development Board.
Hi, Catherine Awakuni Cologne here. I'm by myself in this office.
Thank you, Kat. For the County of Hawaii Department of Planning. Hey, Jeff, that's you. Okay.
Sorry, Mike was off. Aloha, everyone. Jeff with planning.
Okay, and for the County of Kauai Department of Planning.
Hello, everyone. Marie Williams with Kauai County Planning Department.
Thank you, Marie. And for the County of Maui Department of Planning, the excused clerk.
Oh, is that maybe JMC? Is that Jackie?
Okay. And then for the City and County Honolulu Department of Planning, welcome, Dina.
Oh, hi, I'm here by myself. Thank you.
Great. Is that you, Jackie Kakakura? There you go, with your headphones on.
Hi, Jackie with the Department of Planning, County of Maui. Thank you.
And keeping warm, I see. Okay. And then we have from UHERO.
Stephen Smith from UHERO.
Okay. Any members that I've missed before we go to guests? Okay. Let's start with guests in the room and then we'll go to the ones online.
Hi, everybody. Josh Wage, Honolulu Collective.
Hi, aloha, Becca Kim. I work for Representative the Nation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, online. Can we move to, let's see, Kainalo Pu'u, Robinson?
Hi, yeah. Kanalapu Robinson. I'm here attending on behalf of Speaker Nadine Nakamura.
Thank you very much. Okay, who else is against? Kate, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hello,
And turn your camera.
my name is Kate. I am from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UH.
Okay, do you have a camera, Kate?
It's not giving me the option on here to turn my camera on. It's showing it as a webinar.
Oh, I think,
we'll. Okay, thank you, yeah. And then Michelle, for the County of Hawaii Planning Department.
Yes, hi, I am here. Nice to see you all.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Okay, anyone else that has not introduced themselves, who's a guest of the, or a member of the public? Okay, well, thank you all. We'll move to approval of minutes of the task force meeting number 3, which we held on December 18th. The draft minutes were posted on OPSD's Phase 2 update webpage and included the meeting materials, which were sent to the task force members and designees. And a print copy was also made available at OPSD per Chapter 92. Task force members, do you have any corrections, additions, edits, or comments or additions? I see any. Seeing none, the minutes will stand as distributed. Okay, we're going to move to our main topic for today, and that's the presentation and discussion of our framework research report. And so the OPSD staff will present findings and analysis of the framework research report. And then after that, we'll include some questions in the report itself. So we'll have an opportunity to discuss all of it. Let's see who's starting. Claire, go ahead and start us off. Oh, did I not introduce you guys? Wait a minute. Hold everything. We need to introduce our staff. Let's start with Isabel and move this way.
hi, my name is Isabel Scholes and I'm staff at Special Plans Branch at OPSD.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Kobayashi, also the Special Plans Branch at OPSC.
Scott Allen, same as the other two.
Claire McCreary, also Special Plans Branch. Lauren Permiano, same.
Okay, all right. So go ahead, Claire.
Okay. Then did it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to kind of start us off, since our last meeting, we've moved to the first half of task 1, which was in our previously approved work plan. So far, the UH Department of Urban and Regional Planning has completed a literature review and has begun doing their stakeholder interviews with the public sector and community and nonprofit sectors. And they've used their initial findings from these inputs to develop a first version of their framework research report, which was included with your meeting materials today. So in our meeting today, we will be summarizing our framework research report's objectives, as well as methods in relation to the work plan. We will also discuss and explore findings from the report, including statewide planning system context, relevance and use of the state plan, and current and emerging objective areas, issues, and needs.
Okay, we're going to move to Scott Allen now to go over the framework objectives. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, so as a reminder, the objective of the framework report is to help examine the role of the State Planning Act, assess the relevancy of the state plan's overarching themes and goals, identify long-range planning priorities, and expand on findings and recommendations from the Phase 1 update report. The methods used to achieve these objectives included a literature review comparing existing plans and policy documents with the State Planning Act and identifying emerging themes, stakeholder interviews to gather insights on planning priorities, challenges, and opportunities, and their relation to the state plan. And then these are further refined by OPSD's synthesis and analysis of the report's core findings. And finally, the task force review and discussion of the preliminary framework. Today's summary and analysis of the report is organized into the 3 sections you see here. The first is the current planning system context, informed by the report's literature review and stakeholder interviews. Second is the relevance and use of the state plan's purpose, principles, values, goals, and objectives, in addition to the applicability of the plan to public and community nonprofit stakeholders. And finally, the third section focuses on emerging planning priorities that will help build the framework and guide work moving forward.
So we'd like to start by briefly summarizing some of the key highlights of what the research revealed about the current planning system context, just to set the stage for today's discussion about the framework. The first may be stating the obvious, but things have changed since the early 70s and 80s. And Hawaii's planning landscape is no exception to that. The State Planning Act was originally adopted at a time when there really wasn't a pre-existing planning ecosystem. And yet now we operate in a time that's shaped by many plans, including those required through legislative mandates, as well as federally driven plans and planning cycles tied to funding requirements. So in the present landscape, state agencies especially have shifted their planning governance away from the functional plans that are prescribed under Chapter 226. And in fact, of the 13 functional areas, only housing has been updated in recent years, and many agencies have instead opted for shorter term, issue-specific strategic plans that serve specific programmatic needs. As we previously discussed, capacity constraints continue to be a major factor, also shaping the current system. State and county agencies have consistently cited not only budget limitations, but also staffing shortages and turnover, as well as competing priorities as among the barriers to maintaining both the functional plans as well as county level plans. Was also a noted lack of familiarity and in some cases lack of awareness of the state plan. And as a result, despite the intent of the state plan to serve as a guiding document, the absence of training for both new and existing staff, as well as training other implicated agencies undermines the effective use of the state plan. And then finally, on coordination, while there are existing bodies such as various commissions and advisory groups, and even cross-agency initiatives that create opportunities for coordination, these practices largely remain informal. And so they often depend on either individual relationships or project champions. And so the coordination that does occur is often ad hoc and sometimes inconsistent across policy areas. And lastly, this informality can also contribute to a lack of clarity or even will with respect to agency roles. And so this reinforces institutional silos, particularly for cross-cutting issues such as climate mitigation and infrastructure investment. These issues tend to span multiple agencies with not only different responsibilities, but also funding streams, timelines, etc. To kind of round out the table setting, the framework research report includes a comparative review of other state planning acts, just really to provide examples for the task force's consideration of potential frameworks as we're thinking about updating the Hawaiʻi State Planning Act framework. And this analysis can be found on pages 11 through 23 of your framework research report. But just to quickly summarize, Maine, Maryland, and California were selected because they represent a spectrum of state level planning governance approaches And similar to Hawaii, each of these state planning acts balance statutory authority with coordination across sub-state jurisdictions. But they do so in sort of distinct ways. And so different sort of insights to offer. Maine has the most compact statutory structure of the three. It has a Growth Management Act, which establishes statewide land use and resource goals, but relies largely on voluntary municipal participation, along with incentives and legal levers to drive alignment. The statute identifies a limited set of required plan components, and they also have administrative rules that define 13 specific topic areas. Not going to list all of them, but it includes things like water resources, housing, transportation, fiscal capacity, and land use. The rules also establish criteria for determining plan consistency. And while plan consistency is not mandatory, the state does tie incentives and consequences to compliance. Maryland statutorily establishes 8 what they call statewide planning principles. Those principles include land, transportation, housing, economy, equity, resilience, place, and ecology. These planning principles must be integrated into local comprehensive plans. There is no formal approval system at the state level, but the framework does include required plan elements as well as regular update cycles, structured state and intergovernmental review periods and processes, as well as targeted agency reviews of specific components. It does have issue-specific policy levers. An example of that is growth tier mapping linked to septic and subdivision limitations. Lastly, California represents the most prescriptive and enforcement-driven model. In addition to requiring long-term plans with specified components of all its cities and counties, it operates a 2-track enforcement system. Most general plan compliance is enforced indirectly through, I guess, what's considered like vertical consistency requirements. For instance, zoning and land use decisions must align with the general plan, but it's also enforceable through litigation. And the courts can invalidate inconsistent actions. One example of more direct state oversight is housing. And the California Department of Housing and Community Development reviews plans, not just for substantial compliance, but they also actively monitor local actions, and they can refer violations to the Attorney General. This, as you can imagine, can trigger enforcement mechanisms, including fines and other court-ordered remedies. So, again, the purpose of providing these examples is just to illustrate a broad spectrum of approaches to structuring and implementing a state planning framework. And they're really just offering insights for consideration by the task force.
So we're going to move to the second section of the research framework, and that is current state plan relevance. And we're going to like to highlight some key findings from the framework research report relating to the relevance and use of the state plan. And more detailed findings can be found on pages 10, 26, 27, and 34 of your report. It's noted below the question bubble on your screen. Overall, the research indicates that the state plan's purpose, which is section 2261, remains relevant. The guiding principles and values in section 2263, such as community well-being, opportunity, and social responsibility, also remain highly relevant, though they could benefit from further clarification. At the same time, interviewees, including both public sector, nonprofit, and community-based organizations, consistently noted that the state plan's broad goals, which are included in 2264, are difficult to translate into actionable strategies. And finally, our review of the county general plans identified some divergence in emphasis. Compared to the state plan, the county plans tend to be less economically focused and more place-based. For example, while the state plan emphasizes self-sufficiency and mobility, county plans more often center on relationships between people and the INA. So we're gonna stop here and go back to the question, do these findings resonate with you? And so, Claire, would you put it on gallery view so I can see folks? Thank you. Oh, wonderful. I'd like to ask, let's see, let's go ahead and start with Leslie. Would you like to comment on the relevance findings that the interviewees came up with for the framework research?
Well, first of all, I want to commend all the work that went into this. Obviously, trying to capture relevance from something that was done in the 70s to how to make it appropriate for us to invest in updating it was very important. This is very helpful. I really like the comparative between the 3 states that you selected. I think they all have, obviously there's no state like ours being not even Alaska. But I thought that was good. I agree that the purpose is very relevant, perhaps now more than ever, as we look at improving our infrastructure, improving our housing inventory, which is the obstacle for pretty much any economic development across all sectors, across all communities. So I do think the purpose is very relevant. I think sometimes it's hard to focus on the long-term planning that has been a problem forever. It's like just do something without looking at its integration into long-term. And I think we're paying for that now in many areas in our communities. And then it's true, it's always difficult for broad overarching goals that have values in them that we all identify with, agree with, and how to translate that into actionable plans at the micro level to continue. So I thought those were all good points that should frame our discussions and our planning process. Anyway, sorry if I was too long-winded.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. Speaking of long-term planning, let's move to Dina, because you have a focus on long-term plans.
Yeah, hi. Okay, I'm just looking at this. So I agree that about the purpose staying relevant. Our general plan does have sections on the economy and the visitor industry. Less economically focused and individual. I didn't quite understand what that means, individualistic compared to the state's plans, values, and goals. I think when we get down to our development plans, though, they do tend to be less economically focused, because they're more on the land use side of things and how that influences the economy. Yeah, that's
Thanks.
about it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's move to Jackie Takakura from now.
So at the planning department here, we mainly refer to the state plan when we're reviewing some of the bigger discretionary permits. When we do the community plan updates, we don't kind of just look at our existing general plan documents, which are the countywide policy plan and the Maui Island plan. So we don't really look at the state, although we are working with Corporation Council to look at that a little bit more closely so that our community plans are more consistent with the HRS 226. I agree that the general plans are less economically focused and more specific to those areas, especially in the areas where there's a lot of tourism. I think the community's kind of tired of, things being prioritized for tourists, so they tend to be like what you're saying here, less economically focused and more individualistic. But yeah, we're working with Corporation Council about making sure we're consistent with HRS 226. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Let's move to Kat.
I don't have much more to add, really. I thought that was helpful to see, and the comparisons definitely among the other states were really helpful to see. So thank you so much for sharing that part too. I agree, that definitely the purpose remains relevant, and that there are, marked differences when looking at the state level as compared to the county level. So I found this all very, it resonated. It seemed very accurate, and I was very appreciative of all of the work that you had done to kind of share that with us.
Thanks, Kat. So, Leonela, Lay, did any of the findings in, around the purpose, resonate with, your charge at Omaha?
Yeah, I thought most of it sounded good. I guess my one comment would be I wouldn't favor a plan, I think, like California, where there's consistency mandates between the state and the local level. I think Hawaii's model of having county plans be able to kind of lead is more flexible and more responsive to community.
So, I had a little bit of difficulty hearing you toward the end. So I don't want to miss what you said. Well, now you're muted. There we
Okay,
go.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying overall it sounded good. I was just noting that I think Hawaii's current planning structure is more flexible than, say, California, where they have the consistency mandate. And I don't think we'd want to adopt something like that because I think the findings show that the local county and community plans are more regularly updated. So we should let the local community level process drive the planning, I think, rather than state down.
Thank you. Let's see, let's move to Marie Williams, followed by Jackie Kynan.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate all the research on the other state planning frameworks, especially those states that have a very strong state planning act. I'd love actually to learn more about that. Yeah, I agree with the findings on the purpose that it's still important to have kind of that state level goal that we need to do long-term planning, that it's important and people need to come together to do this work, and we should use our various planning tools. With the principles, values, and goals, just like how Dina said, I wasn't maybe I'm not sure if a different word should be used, but I wasn't exactly sure, but it meant that the county general plans are less individualistic compared to the state plan values and goals. And just on that note, it might, at least my reading of the various general plans, it seems like all of our county general plans are quite different in how comprehensive they are. Some are quite short and some are like ours is everything. We literally covered everything under the sun, which maybe isn't the best approach, but Yeah, I think that all the county general plans are kind of different, are very different, and that's another study in and of itself, but it might be hard to like summarize like county general plans as one as like a similar type. And maybe that's some direction for this study. It's like what are the strengths and weaknesses of the different approaches, and is there one that's like ideal and or like a template we should use that the state plan can support or help guide. Uh, yeah, sorry, that's about it. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no, Jackie, go ahead, Jack.
Hi, everybody. So hi, my Leslie and Kat. Anyway, I think the state plan is still very relevant in purpose, but perhaps not in practice. Its intent, coordinated long-term planning for our economy, environment, and communities is exactly what we need. But I feel like today it's mostly a high-level reference. So kind of echoing what Lena Alla said earlier, agencies and counties aren't really using it to guide decisions, which kind of shows a disconnect. And I think it's kind of all I have to add. I'm sorry. I'm pretty much in agreement with a lot of the comments made earlier.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, and then we'll move to members in the room.
I'm sorry, was that me?
Yeah, that's you, Jeff.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it seems like everyone touched upon everything I was looking at. I do like, as mentioned, these comparisons with other states and how they are different. It seems like ours is really taking a turn right now as far as our general plan. We're in the midst of the comprehensive update, and there's been a major shift that occurred, and I think it's because of this, um, you know, overall thinking that the general plan really is just that, just a general plan that really is there and not necessarily, um, it can direct us, but we're not held to it. Um, and if we feel like we'd rather go that way, we can, um, which in my opinion really feels like that is missing the whole point of a long range general plan for our island. That's why I also tend to agree with California and their elements as far as mandatory type consistency. Um, and also to the point that it's almost like a legal enforcement. I don't know if I would go to that point, but for sure, you want to have consistency with whatever decision you make, that it's consistent with the general plan and its direction. If we end up going off on our own and on our own track and not following the general plan, we basically are not going to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve for a long range, for our future of our planning efforts, and not only our county, for the state as well. Um, Unfortunately, I'm kind of in this situation right now, and so we're having to really battle to maintain um, that necessary component to planning on our island right now. We'll see what happens on April 7th when the whole thing comes to a head, but we have a pretty powerful plan that's proposed, and then one was just out of the blue initiated by a council member that had no public input, just felt like, oh, we want to shorten the plan and this is what we want to do. And as a result, it may end up really undermining the whole. There's a lot of talk about making sure you have a public process in your relevance and your document, the framework document, and that is key, not only for the state plan, but for the general plans. It is the people's plans. You have to have public input. It's not one person's plan or a council's plan, even though they'll approve it. It's done by the overwhelming collaboration of communities and people and landowners and developers and everybody getting involved in talking about what they would like to see happen, where you come up with this direction for our county and our state. Um, anyway, sorry I got off track. I'm a little um, going through a lot with this right now, but it really does talk about the need and relevance for these plans and making sure that we continue to push for their relevance in what we do.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your sharing that. That's helpful. Let's move to Michael Kane,
All right.
followed by Stephen Bond Smith.
All right, I think my comments will jump around a lot. I'm looking at the slide, page 13, applicability of the state plan in the public sector. And it actually concur with a lot of the conclusions that you found. I know, so my specific job is Administrator, Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands, and our priority is protecting the public trust resources. I don't ever refer to the state land in my reports, just to be blunt. We'll reference sector specific plans like North Shore or West Valley Protection. We'll listen to the county plans and work with county planners and follow federal laws, but state plan, I think it could be useful, but at this point, we treat it more as an archival document. And I guess that's the first bullet point. The state plan is viewed as outdated, reflecting planning assumptions, categories and land use references developed decades ago. The categories still look good to me. Sometimes I think there's a sense that there's a bias in favor of development over sustainability or the protection of public trust resources. And in the 70s, obviously that was the state goal of economic development, and the values of the people of the state that evolved and changed. And finally, the California plan, when I hear like enforcement through litigation, that just sounds like the most horrifying outcome. So let's avoid that if we can.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
No, thank you. That's helpful. Stephen Bond Smith, thoughts?
So I was pleasantly surprised to see this statement that the principles remain highly relevant, but could be clarified to reflect current priorities. The fact that they remain relevant to me suggests that they have actually been flexible enough over 40 years to still be realistic. The reason they don't reflect current priorities, I don't think is actually, I mean, they do need to be updated, sure, but they still need to remain flexible enough that they'll be relevant in 40 years' time. The principles themselves are not how planning is done. That's the overarching principle. So what's important more is how those are operationalized, and how they're operationalized is should be flexible then over time. That will evolve with current priorities, right? So the principles themselves should be consistent. How they're operationalized can evolve with local priorities and so on, as long as it's consistent with the requirements of that state plan. I also noticed everybody was saying that we never refer to the state plan. I don't think you should ever have to really refer to the state plan. If you have a local plan that is consistent and meets all the requirements of the state plan, then that's all you ever need to refer to is your local plan, right? So when people design a local plan, it should be meeting the requirements of the state plan, and after that, the local plan is the thing that does the functional job of planning. And the other thing I just want to mention is that I think the role of planning is not, although we call it planning, it's not really about planning and prescribing what that future is about. What really the role of planning is about facilitating decisions that people are going to make. And this is the reason it doesn't reflect current priorities at all, is that people are making decisions that people didn't think about in 1986, right? So the plan itself shouldn't be trying to decide what we're going to make decisions on in 20 years' time. What the plan is the set of governance and rules that we'll use in order to facilitate that discussion about how we make those decisions in 20, 30 years' time as issues arise, as there's another wildfire or a flood, or, it's not prescribing this is what happens during a flood. It should be really saying these are the sort of activities that go on in order to decide what happens, right? So keeping that in mind, that the Planning Act itself is not prescriptive, but facilitates decisions that other people get to make, whether they want to build a supermarket or a factory or a house or apartment buildings. Those are the types of decisions that people want to make, and they can come to their planning authority to be able to get permission to do that. And then the planning authority essentially uses the principles and how it's operationalized in the local plan to decide whether or not that's going to be allowed in the vacation road. Right? But that's very different than saying this is the area we're going to have dense development, this is the area where we're not, and we're not going to allow this in these places. And right, that's very prescriptive. I'm saying the plan itself should be really a lot more hands off than that. It's really about how do you actually make those decisions for a future that we don't yet know what it looks like.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of guests in the room, and online. Let's start with Josh.
Hi, everybody. For anyone, I'm running into Josh Wish with Quorum Market. I've got a few notes that I jotted down, we'll kind of share out. And thanks for all the work that's gone into this, and for all the interviews we've already done. It's definitely seemed like we're hearing some common themes, which is both encouraging, and also we should also probably always keep an eye out when we're hearing too many common themes. Does that mean that there's something that we're missing? Or do we need some additional voices in the room that might kind of throw a rock into the water and create some more ripples there in a constructive way? But just a couple of notes. One is, I think I've heard a few people note that there are a lot of things in the State Planning Act that are still relevant. I think everyone would agree that there's certainly a number of things that aren't, but that there's a lot of stuff that's relevant, but that it's not being used. And so to Stephen's recent points about that you're not just trying to be prescriptive and just have a list of everything that you should do. One thing from what I'm seeing is I'd recommend is we're taking a look at this. It's not necessarily just what are the new things we should put in, but what is a reframed infrastructure within the State Planning Act? What's kind of the reframed structure that creates the right incentives so that the act actually is being used? And to see if there are certain places where there is the tension between the states and counties or something else, where you're thinking this just isn't going to be used. I think part of the decision point there might be, does that mean we just shouldn't include it in here if it's going to be completely ignored? Or we just haven't found the right enforcement mechanism for it yet. One analogy I have in my head is I was walking in the park last night in Tampa, and there's the one paved pathway that you're supposed to take. And then there was the one pathway where just all of the grass has been beaten down that everyone's already taken. And so which one are we trying to incentivize the use of, and which one are we trying to enforce? That's one thought there. A couple other quick things. I noted that, and thanks again for starting to reach out to some of the nonprofit and community members. I know we haven't quite gotten, from the looks of it, to interviewing some of the private sector folks. Just one thought if there is any kind of agreement that we need to figure out the incentive structure, we need to figure out the teeth on this, we need to figure out kind of the ownership question, who actually ultimately is responsible for some of these things and gauging metrics of how you're doing. The private sector is very good at that. And as someone who spent a decade in public service so far between the state and the federal government, I'm not throwing box, I've just been in both places. And so it might be good to try to bring some of those voices in as soon as possible into figuring this piece out, rather than just bringing them in later and saying, here's what we've done and what do you think? But see if they can help figure out some of those incentive structures, enforcement structures, ownership metrics, those kind of things. And I think I've probably already spoken enough for now, so I'll turn it over.
Ms. Kim.
I am here just to take notes, but I do hear some really good things. Things like consistent, operational, flexible. And I guess the question to you was like, why is it more individualistic versus broad plan? And I guess it's just a lot of conversation. Again, I'm here to just take notes, but it's very optimistic. So yeah,
Thank you. Okay, let's move to online. Kainalo, did you have any comments on relevance of the state plan at this point?
Speaker just, wanted to say she appreciated the work that went through the report, but yeah, she didn't pass on any comments besides that.
Matt, did you have any comments you'd like to share? Oh, I guess not. Thank you, Matt. All right. Anybody else that I missed? We've got other opportunities because we've, Michelle, do you want to add to Jeff's comments or you, let his comments stand for now. We'll move on. We're going to go to the next part of this section, and that's applicability of the state plan to the public sector. And so the state plan is, here's some findings, some common consistent themes that the research team found. The state plan is widely viewed as outdated, reflecting planning assumptions, policy categories, and land use frameworks developed decades ago. Stakeholders noted overlapping and at times conflicting regulatory requirements across policy areas. In transportation planning, for instance, certain regulatory provisions may not align with broader state planning objectives. And there's also a clear lack of guidance on implementation, including how the state plan should be applied. That's Stephen's comment. And how often it should be updated and what the update process should entail. And more broadly, the report identifies a gap between the state plan's high-level goals and practical implementation. And as a result, agencies tend to rely more on sector-specific plans, county plans, federal regulatory frameworks, and strategic plans to guide decision. So let me go to the public sector folks. If the plan is updated, do you see a different role that the state plan should play in today's world? I'll start with, let's start with, who did we start with before? Let's go to Dina first. Thoughts on a different role for the state plan?
When we do our, we look to the state plan, the general plan, and all of our development plans when we process discretionary land use approvals. So the role would be the same, where we always look to the plan to highlight what is consistent, how the project is consistent with the plan. So I think the role would be the same, but an updated plan would definitely be more applicable because it would have, the subject areas that are facing us today, instead of what was in place years ago. Yeah, and I do agree on this, the last point about we tend to rely more on our county plan. So the section where we talk about consistency with our development plans is probably a little more detailed and more specific on that part.
let's see, Marie, Jeff, or Jackie, any thoughts on whether the role of the state plan should change or to be helpful in today's world?
This is Jackie from Maui. I suppose if you wanted it to be more effective, you could tie funding requirements to it, like how the state gives out money. You could say it must be consistent with the state plan. But, like Dina mentioned, we kind of use them for the bigger discretionary permits. We don't really use it for much else. And I think you probably see this on the other neighbor islands too, where you've got these more remote areas like Hana or Molokai that may not necessarily want to be consistent with some of the state goals, so that can be kind of challenging sometimes. But I think a lot of the community members are going to be more familiar with their own community plans and get after us to enforce or implement those items more so than the state level.
Thank you. Marie, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the update of the state plan should build in clear guidance for us and our plans as well. I actually love Jackie's idea that if there's if funding is provided to update our general plans, then that would help. Like maybe it could be tied, some strings are tied that try to follow this template or follow these, like make sure that you show that you're um kind of building in the state planning framework somehow into your county plan. And I just wanted to bring up, since this is public sector, I know you're kind of asking all of us as the counties, but a question I have is, I know on the state level, there's a lot of plans too. And like what is the role of the state plan and Office of Planning and kind of coordinating statewide on that level as well? Because right now it does seem like there are a lot of plans, of course, and it might be impossible to, kind of get everyone under the same area. But yeah, anyway, that's just something I thought about when I saw like how the state plan applies to the public sector. It's also how does this plan apply to and guide the work of the other state agencies? Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, any thoughts?
I'm sorry, are you asking me again, Mary Alice?
I am, but you can pass if you want, because there'll be other opportunities to comment.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying Jim every time you say Jeff. Sorry about that.
No.
That's why I get a little confused.
My
Um,
apologies.
no, I don't know if I would go as far as Jackie and Marie, kind of using funding as a mechanism to force compliance, but obviously that would put some pressure. I mean, typically, like I mentioned earlier, we're going through the comprehensive review, and it is initiated uh, based out of 22658. And, we follow that. We create our functional plans, we create our general plans, we try to align with the state plan overall as far as our overall objectives that are spelled out in the plan. But uh, I I think what would be helpful is exactly what you're doing, updating the plan. But even more than that, which you also have been doing, um, more so than I remember in the past, is coordinating with the counties and creating that that communication link in that partnership. It might be good. I don't know. You guys already have enough work, but if you could consider participating, OPSD playing a part in comprehensive reviews of general plans, with the counties, just to kind of guide and make sure that connection between the state and county plans work. That might also help out.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, we have two other members of the public sector here in the room. Do you want to add thoughts beyond litigation being your work?
I mean, I think I jumped ahead in my first comments, so.
That
I'll
was all
probably keep doing that.
okay. Stephen, any thoughts on whether the public sector's role in state plan should change to changing times?
I view it as, are we talking here about the public having, the public sectors having input into other planning, like other people's planning? Because that information necessarily have more of a role than any other stakeholder. Otherwise, public sectors themselves have to abide by state plan, county plans to get permission for the activities that they want to do. But whether or not, a particular government department has a say over, I think that the mechanism should be set up in ways that it's flexible enough that it's not something that's necessarily more special or less than everything else.
Okay, let's move on to the next sector here, and this is applicability of the state plan to the nonprofit and community sector. So the current interviews with the nonprofit and community sector suggest that the state plan and related planning frameworks have not kept pace with contemporary challenges. Stakeholders suggested the plan could be updated to include emerging priorities such as food security, environmental stewardship, and long-term economic stability. That another finding was that the state plan is outdated, lacks teeth, is overly broad, weakly enforceable, and that there is a gap in implementation and a lack of ownership related to the state plan, particularly a lack of clarity in terms of who is responsible for implementing the state plan and how its policies actually manifest in decisions. And this is coming from the nonprofit and community interviews. So if the plan is updated, what role should the state plan play for nonprofit and community organizations? Let's ask Jackie Kina to start that one off for us.
I think for the nonprofit and community sector, the state plan should be a tool that connects community priorities to state action, not something that sits above or outside of it. And I think right now there's a disconnect. Many community organizations don't see the plan reflected in funding decisions, programs, or on the ground outcomes. And I feel like that limits its relevance. Sorry.
Oh, that's good.
My brain is overloaded. I think if updated, the state plan should play a more practical and enabling role. It should clearly signal statewide priorities, help align funding and policy, and create pathways for community-based organizations to plug in implementation. I think that's all my brain has right now. So.
Hey, thank you. Let's go to Kat. Thoughts on what if the plan is updated, what the role for it should play for nonprofits and community sector.
Yeah, we definitely reference, the state plan when we are talking about sort of, I guess, applying for different kinds of programs and such. I think I agree with what everybody's been saying about how, because it is outdated, that can be a challenge. And that there is that disconnect between what we hear from community and sort of their plans as compared to the state plan. But we also want to ensure that we are, I guess, compliant ourselves by referencing the state plan. And so, from a nonprofit perspective, we don't want to just omit, any reference to the state plan, because then it looks like, well, we've either forgotten or it's an oversight or something like that. But, we're trying to, I guess, figure out a way to weave the connection ourselves between what we see in terms of other community plans and the state plan. So I think, part of the challenge too will be figuring out how to sort of timely review and refresh. And I know that, we're talking about that too as well. But just kind of acknowledging that is also a challenge.
Okay, yeah, the SEDS is on a 5-year schedule, but the state plan appears to be on a 40-year schedule. But that's not really different. Leslie.
I could just say ditto to what Jackie and Kat said, but there's such a cultural disconnect. You just hinted at that, Mary Alice. Nonprofits, we have to deal in the day-to-day realities of our communities, whether it's crisis or whatever. So 40-year plans, and even for, I think, nonprofits, most of our boards are going to require that we look at our own organizational plans at least every 5 years with a midterm correction and adjustment. So that's long-term planning for the survival of most nonprofits and for feeling that they're being responsive in community, because we're the ground game, right? So I can see very clearly why your interview showed outdated disconnect, that because it's so different from the reality of being a nonprofit. And I have a quick, funny answer for the little bubble you had on the side. What was the question? How could the state plan be relevant? What is the question in the bubble on the side there that was in the last slide? Anyway, I can guarantee that 95% of the nonprofits will tell you the role of the state is to fund, to cough up the money and allocate and appropriate the funds for implementation is what they're going to see the state's role is. But of course, obviously, alignment, how in the future can we better align all of these things, will only improve the future of our state.
Thank you, Leslie. And yes. Okay, we're gonna,
Sorry.
jump in. Go
Because,
ahead.
so I also volunteer for nonprofits, so I'm gonna switch hats a little bit.
Good.
Because this is an area I think the state fund has a lot of potential. More so than telling the counties what to do. In terms of developing statewide policies, one for economic stability. You mentioned food security, we have homeless issues, housing issues, mental health issues. And then environmental stewardship is a big issue. Like we have enough regulations and rules, but developing statewide policies for how do we steward the land and how do we involve the communities. I think it's a potential role for a state plan to provide like clear guidance. And like from the housing sector, we spend our days chasing grants because there is no federal housing policy or no state housing policy. We would say we and then that's not a sustainable method of taking care of it. So I'll go back to being DLNR.
Thank you. When you wear two hats, you get this infinite. So we've got one last, slide.
Josh is gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just
You're
one-
welcome.
One quick thing to put a little bit of other commentary on some of what came out, was in looking here about the gap in the implementation. Just a quick note, I don't know if anyone's read Jennifer Walker's book, Recoding America. She's the founder of Code for America. She's spent a lot of time working for state and federal government. And one of the things that she specifically noted is one of the challenges that the gap between who is writing the policies versus the person between who is implementing them is wide and deep. And the two like almost never talk to each other, which is one of the reasons we have that challenge. I think that's something to keep in the back of our heads. I think maybe one example, specific example, but I'll let the folks on screen tell me if this is a good or a bad one, is even things like when the state is providing funding for the nonprofits, but you take a look at the work that the True Cost Coalition has been doing, noting that it's not coming in at enough to actually support the work that they're providing. That feels like that's a gap in implementation, because obviously the policy was to try to support that work, but it's not happening, which is necessitating policy interventions. So I think that might just be one other area to underscore why that has that second.
Thank you for noting that. Yes. Okay, then we have, we'll go to the last slide in this section, which is current state plan relevance. So the interview review and the current interview suggest that the state plan's overarching objectives, such as supporting economic development, environmental stewardship, and community well-being, remain consistent with the state agency's missions, and the existing objective areas still capture the major dimensions of statewide planning. But policy contexts have evolved since the plan was last revised in 1986, and the more recent county general plans have shifted from the original 5 objective and policy areas, incorporating updated terminology and priorities. So we'll move now. We want to take a short break, or do we want to just move right into the third and last section of the review of the research framework?
If we could keep going, Mary Alice.
Okay.
We'll try to speed through this next section so that we can get to the OPSD analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So David Kobayashi is going to take on this slide, and go ahead, David.
Okay, so our research has also examined what planning priorities have emerged or evolved since the original state plan by actually looking at the work that the counties have been doing and what topics are covered in current county general plans. So that's what you're looking at on your screen right now. Looking across the top of the table, you'll see 6 broad policy areas that can be identified across the plan. And as you'll see, these kind of closely resemble the original 5 in the state plan that were on the previous slide. If we look below into the table at concepts like available housing or say complete communities, we can see how many of these topics have evolved or maybe taken on a newer, different framing since the original state plan, but also have some DNA from the old state plan as well. In addition, some of the topics, for example, if you look at, say, sustainability or climate change, weren't in the original, but actually got added on. So this is kind of providing a current picture of what at least the counties seem to think the current planning landscape is, although Jeff may change that sooner or later. So moving to the next slide, if the past slide was looking at trying to bring us to a more contemporary view of the planning environment by looking at the current plans, our research was also trying to identify what are those new and emerging issues and new and future needs through interviews. So we asked stakeholders to try to identify the issues that will shape statewide planning priorities over the next 10 to 20 years. And we've had a array of answers, some of which can be found on the screen, but also if you're looking for a more complete list, you can find it on page 33 for the public sector and page 37 for the nonprofit and community stakeholders. One thing though I also want to remind everybody when looking at this report and also the list you're seeing is that all of these things that you're seeing and these quotes are actually trying to be generally representative perspectives held by multiple stakeholders rather than just one. So just because it's a quote doesn't mean that that's representing only one person. The researchers just thought that this was indicative of a general trend or general pattern that they were seeing across multiple people. with regard to these emerging issues and needs, though, this task force has also mentioned issues like brain drain, digital economy, AI, and cost of living as other big things that we need to make sure we are including in this new update. Actually, Mary Alice, I think for time's sake, we're gonna pass this question and move on.
Yeah.
So in the interviews, stakeholders also pointed to several more planning specific issues and needs. Public stakeholders, for instance, highlighted the importance and challenge of accounting for uncertainty in long-term planning with issues like climate change, infrastructure resilience, technological change, and evolving development patterns being identified as sort of some of the biggest sources of that uncertainty. Given these uncertainties, it's probably no surprise that these stakeholders expressed interest in things like scenario planning, as well as concern about the reliability of conventional planning tools and methods. Public stakeholders also mentioned, as was previously discussed, capacity challenges like staffing shortages, retainment. And the final big common theme was that stakeholders also mentioned opportunities to leverage emerging technologies like AI, data analytics, and even virtual reality to kind of improve planning efficiency. The nonprofit community and other community stakeholders expressed similar views on technologies as both that challenge and opportunity. They also expressed interest in more implementation-oriented planning with clearer priorities, measurable outcomes, and more practical tools. So a lot of what we've heard as well. I guess to try to consolidate all these questions, maybe the right question is were there any reactions to that from the task force? And is that resonating with folks?
No, switch to the gallery view again. Okay, anybody want to offer a comment on that question?
I will. Yeah, just wanted to, in terms of emerging planning issues, just for Kauai County at least, my planning director, he is really focused on wildfire right now, and in fact, us staff have been sent to so far to wildfire planning conferences, where we're basically the only planners in the room, but it's just really kind of driving home how a lot of the ways we can reduce our risk is really starts with planning and zoning and our subdivision codes. So that, and I think it was addressed in the slide, sorry, the climate risks. So I just want to reiterate that this is a really priority and emerging issue for our planning department that we'll be focused on. And oh, and I just will say on that, I know that kind of the knee-jerk reaction is that, well, should like community plans or the general plan address this because we have our hazard plans, right, that we update every 5 years. But in some ways, those are kind of more action-based or project-oriented plans. And by focusing on it in our plans, it's kind of a way to develop the policy and bring it to our land use codes as well, because it seems that some changes might be required there. And just on the capacity issue that I think we all struggle with and face, part of that also relates to how, just speaking for us, we aren't able to update our plans as frequently or kind of stick to a schedule that we would hope to, where we can update all our plans like every 10 to 15 years. We still have 2 plans that are nearing 50 years old, and so we're trying to get back on that schedule. But it is a capacity issue, but it's also, I think, a product of our plan update process. And so, like, is there a way and sorry, this might not even be related to the state plan, but like, is there a way to have a more nimble plan update process? I would love to see that just so we can, because I truly believe that a plan really is only useful for about 10, maybe 15 years. And then after that, no one uses it. And it kind of degrades the value of our work even because then it doesn't reflect what the community wants. Developers are unclear. And yeah, so I would just love to get to a point where all our county plans that are can be updated more frequently.
Thank you.
About it. Thank you.
Did you say that the county of Kauai has a hazard plan for the county?
Yeah, I believe all the counties, the emergency management,
Oh, okay. Got it.
yeah,
Yeah.
they update, and I think they are required by FEMA to update on the 5-year cycle, so that happens.
And it sounds like, at least in Hawaii County, that hazard plan done by your emergency management agency then gets used by the county planning department in looking at what those hazards are and how they're changing. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, and I will also mention when it comes to climate change hazards, we did just update our climate adaptation and action plan that kind of I feel that the hazard mitigation plans, um, they're a little bit more focused on the projects that you might want FEMA to fund in case something horrible happens. But we have a climate adaptation and action plan that kind of develops policy and a mid-range action plan for us to move forward and what projects we have to and studies that we'll need in place. So there's an overlap, but they're also very different as well. So
Thanks, Maureen. Leonela, I noticed that the nonprofit and community stakeholders listed as an emerging issue, Native Hawaiian cultural knowledge and community-based perspectives in long-term planning. And is that something you're hearing from your beneficiaries as well?
Yeah, I think, definitely, I would say that that is a priority for our beneficiaries to have Native Hawaiian perspectives reflected in state decision making. But similar to what other folks have said, it's hard sometimes, I think, for the community to see where the rubber hits the road on the plan and how it connects to actual decisions. So while certainly I think that is a sentiment our constituents would support, I think it's the question of how is that reflected in the plan and made meaningful.
Thank you, thank you. And then, so we've got comments on climate change and environmental hazards as an emerging issue. And then the fact that some of the hazard data is outdated based on, emerging climate change issues or just emerging hazards. And haven't heard anybody talk about water as a planning issue, an emerging issue that is, I would say, probably related to housing stability, economic diversification, and other economics. Kat, do you want to talk about the role of water and watershed planning for the other emerging issues or as an emerging issue?
I'm actually glad that you mentioned that. I mean, because it's such a critical issue as we've seen, and it has so many, it connects to everything. Housing, cultural issues. Yeah, just it is also so fraught. I don't know exactly what the sort of silver bullet is and in terms of how to address those issues. But I mean, I think definitely it needs to be, among, sort of the topics that are regularly updated and addressed.
Absolutely. I was going to raise my hand on that. As you can imagine, in Maui, the water issue is elevated to a very top infrastructural planning requirement, from everything that Kat mentioned, but particularly in hazard mitigation and hazard planning. Then, of course, it has been a major obstacle in bringing on housing inventory, which is critical for all economic issues across every sector that we're looking to try to develop, particularly those that are in the sectors of trying to lend to diversifying the economy. And the ownership of water is a huge topic with not concurrence, and how to approach it has been, did you use the word fraught, Kat? I think that is the right word. Fraught with disagreement, and lack of consensus. And of course, there is an underlying, very important cultural value about water that goes back to colonization issues that are, are very much challenging and emotional. So, yeah, I was super happy to see that on the list because I think we would look like we had our heads in the sand if it wasn't elevated at this juncture. I think a lot of lessons learned of not giving it the attention that it needs have caused a lot of challenges, issues, and tragedy.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you very much.
This
Are
is
there-
Jackie from Maui, sorry, but on this
Yes,
topic
go
of water, though, this is going to have to be a conversation also with the commission, on water resource management, because you've got the water use and development plans, and I know there was talk long ago of the planning departments taking on more of a water role, but this is kind of bigger than just the planning departments. It's got to include the water departments and all of those other entities too. And not just water, but like I was talking with Corporation Council about, in the community plans, they want to regulate development around gulches, but some of these environmental factors could be maybe better addressed on a state level, like gulches, how far and how do we determine what can and can't happen? Because I mean, they some of them turn into streams sometimes, and which is state Poliana. It's just a bigger issue than what a community plan should manage. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate that. Were there any comments on the planning specific issues and needs? Let's see on the next slide. It's actually page 19 in your handout. And it speaks more to the process of planning.
Sorry, Mary Alice, I think Dina might want to say something.
What's that?
Dina.
Yeah, Mary Alice, I was just going to add at city and county,
Yes.
we have a one water approach, right? So we've been incorporating that into our development plans as its own chapter, and we have a working group with representatives from the different line agencies, and they're coming up with, I believe, like a list of projects that should be implemented in the near, mid, long term. And just, I wanted to add, going back to the topics in the general plans, there was a 6 on that one slide, but I didn't see in here, or maybe it's included in one of them, anything about like food security and agriculture. We're working on updating the sustainable community plans for North Shore and Waianae, and those are still really big topic areas that generate lots of discussion. So,
Do you see that falling in under the environment topic under the topics in county general plans? You think would it fall under one of the other issues?
in our general plan that we just updated, I think it was in 2021, we kind of break these six subject areas up until more fine detail, like housing would be its own section, and like energy its own. So it's a little just more of a finer breakdown.
Okay,
Yeah.
but maybe, yeah, maybe that's an issue that needs to get up to the state plan as well. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So we're, oh, Stephen, go
So I
ahead.
think, when I read through these, the slides and look at the different issues, there is a mixture of things there that are about the mechanisms in the act itself, and there is a bunch of things that are very specific issues like climate or AI, water even. And I think that need to be distinguished between when you're talking about mechanisms and you're talking about very specific issues. And if we focus the plan too heavily on the specific issues, and even something as important as water, if you focus the plan too heavily on these specific issues, that's what makes it outdated in 20 years' time. Right. So I think, and particularly as I get to the conclusions, it's very much focused on these kind of issues. But I think the sort of guiding framework for how the new act should be written, how the new plan should be written, should really focus on those mechanisms. And if you get the mechanisms right, then whatever issues come up with water or AI or some other technology I haven't thought of yet can be addressed within the plan at that future stage, right? It's getting so that the act itself should be sort of defining the mechanisms for these types of decision making, rather than necessarily exactly how water is managed or how technology is going to affect industry or whatever. Right?
So
I think
speaks to what's currently in part two, but I mean.
I think the pointing out that the current act doesn't sort of meet these accommodate these particular issues. That's not evidence that those issues need to be added to the new act. That's evidence that the current sets of mechanisms are not working. Right now, just want to put more emphasis on the mechanisms rather than being able to name specific issues like human climate. I mean, these things are going to exist for a long time, but they're also going to change over time. How we respond to them is going to change over time. And if we name them very specifically in the act, that makes it a rigid framework that becomes outdated very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to David for the key takeaways.
Sure. So I think most of what we've been covering are found in these key takeaways. Some things I wanted to emphasize before we go into the next section though were first the idea that one of the recurring themes was that many of these planning challenges are cross-sectoral, suggesting strength and integration across these policy areas. And next that perhaps the state plan should better reflect, although I think Stephen was getting at this, should better reflect or better be able to accommodate perhaps some of these existing issues since they're only partially reflected in the plans, since they're only partially reflected in the plan system framework. But I want to stop there with highlighting these so we can move on to our next section with Scott Allen.
Go ahead, Scott.
All right, so based on the framework report, we wanted to also share our insights into how we could potentially frame the work of the permitted interaction groups moving forward. So with our current thinking, we're organizing findings from the report around cross-cutting systems or priorities that organize how issues manifest and are addressed across sectors such as health and education. So the first priority is climate adaptation and resilience. So this would potentially examine how Hawaii can respond to climate change by reducing risk, strengthening adaptive capacity, and enhancing the resilience of communities, ecosystems, and infrastructure. The work of this permitted interaction group would focus on challenges such as long-term environmental change, hazard mitigation, and integrated strategies across sectors and scales. The column on the right here shows how this priority cuts across themes and topics in the existing county general plans. But for a more specific sector-based example, using education, this permitted interaction group could explore objectives such as using school facilities as emergency shelters or ensuring climate resilience educational infrastructure. Next, we have housing and community stability. So this would examine the conditions necessary for people to live, remain, and thrive in their communities, including housing affordability, availability, and quality, as well as access to services, infrastructure, and safe, supportive environments. The work of this PEG would consider how land use, economic forces, and infrastructure systems shape stability and displacement. So going back to the education sector example, this PEG might consider objectives such as access to schools, school siting and safe communities, and stability for students, educators, and their families. Our third cross-cutting priority is economic stewardship and resilience. So this would examine how Hawaii can cultivate a resilience and locally grounded economy through responsible management of resources, support for local industries, and strategic diversification. The work of this PIG would consider workforce development, innovation, and the relationships between economic activity, environmental limits, and community well-being. So continuing on with the education example, this PIG might look at teacher recruitment and retention or alignment of curriculum and educational programs with future industries. Moving on, we have culture and place. So this priority would center the relationships between people, land, and identity, including the protection and perpetuation of Native Hawaiian knowledge, cultural practices, heritage, and sense of place. The work of this permitted interaction group might examine how planning can support belonging, continuity, and meaningful connection to place across diverse communities. In terms of education, this could explore objectives such as the incorporation of Ike and cultural knowledge and integration of place-based education. And finally, we have a priority that looks at the planning systems and coordination itself. So this priority would evaluate how the planning system functions across agencies and scales, including decision-making structures, public engagement practices, data and information systems, and interagency coordination. The work of this permitted interaction group could identify systemic barriers and opportunities to improve alignment, transparency, and effectiveness in statewide planning. So then to close out the example using the education sector, this permitted interaction group may look at coordination between DOE, counties, and state agencies, as well as community input in school planning and data sharing.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So your last slide, oh no, we've got announcements coming up. Shows how these cross-cutting priorities and the general themes and the key topics that can be integrated seem to come out of the research framework that we've been the topic for this meeting. And you can see there's a combination there of current emerging issues and some of the things that are required to make those happen and how they are integrated. Bringing this all together, the table visualizes the relationship between cross-cutting planning priorities, general plan themes, and key topics as described in the report. We have just time for some short comments on this before we move into what we're going to be doing next at the next meeting. Do these cross-cutting priorities resonate with you? Is there anything missing? I think that I'm not going to call on people. I'll just let you raise your hand or jump right in. We'll start online and then we'll move to in the room. Anyone?
I'll bring something up. Yeah, this is great, and thank you so much for this work. I think all of these priorities are emerging and really important. Just in terms of something that is missing, if I would say kind of like it's not really an emerging issue, but public health and safety as it relates to how we design and build our towns. I know that the Department of Health has done so much amazing work with the Healthy Hawaiʻi plan and all their focused area plans. And in those plans, they really do explain how a lot of the health issues that we face, there is a tie back to how we plan areas as well and how we build our roads and our infrastructure and the proximity of housing to schools and jobs and so forth in terms of how people live their lives. So I feel at least for us here, we've been working in this realm of trying to get to think about the health of everyone in our plans and trying to build that into our plans and some zoning code changes too. So I feel that's a cross-cutting priority that really wasn't around, 15 years ago. But there's a lot more attention on that, especially here. Especially a lot of the work is being done by the the Hawaii Public Health Institute and Department of Health. Yeah, so just wanted to bring that up as well.
Good catch, Marie. I agree with you. Having heard our State Department of Transportation's projects that promote pedestrian and bicycle use and walkable communities, they do change the design of our land use in promoting health. That's a great idea. Thank you for offering that. Any other missing either cross-cutting priorities, themes, or key topics?
I just want to real quick.
Go ahead, Michael.
Second what Marie said, I think public health or community mental health needs to be a major priority.
All right.
I don't know where transportation issues are fit. And that's not something you could have on the state level.
Yes.
Or need to be at the state level.
Yes.
And then just one final comment. I've never been on a pig. I know that my administration advises me never to serve on one. So I hope we're not, I don't want to commit to that process without thinking it through. Because I understand that it can be limiting and given the free-form discussion we need. But that's based on no experience because I've lost everything.
Okay. Would it make a difference if we renamed a temporary investigative group?
I think the issue of pigs is you have to post your agenda, it has to be sunshine, it only really limits.
No, actually the opposite.
What?
Permitted interaction groups do not. Chapter 92 says that a permitted interaction group does not have to post an agenda. It can meet whenever it's convenient for the members, but again, it has to be one less than quorum. So that you can't have a majority of the sunshine, which we're treating this as in a permitted interaction group, because they could make a decision and then vote as a majority to on that when they report out their findings. So maybe he was thinking about sunshine.
I'm not sure.
Yes. Okay, any other missing? We have transportation, we have health issues and community mental health issues, other topics that should be included in this chart.
Mary Allison, we maybe follow up on that?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so just to kind of comment, I know that we probably should have had a fancy graphic to illustrate this better, but we're not trying to insinuate that things like public health or transportation are not included in this, but that transportation would be unpacked like under climate adaptation and resilience. It might be looking at the physical infrastructure, whereas under housing and community stability, it might be like access to services, mobility, those sorts of things. So in terms of public health, there are certain things, again, that could probably, in terms of like the design, could be under culture and place, but also some of the public health could also be under the housing and community stability. So it's not necessarily saying that these don't exist, it's just that they would be explored in different ways across the cross-cutting priorities.
Yeah, maybe we can add them so that people know that they're not missing.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, across these 5 different issues that I mentioned, I think the 5th one is very different than what the other 4 are. The first 4 are basically naming specific issues, whereas the 5th one is actually the foundational piece that the other 4 are also including, but it's really the 5th one is the making about the mechanisms.
Yeah.
The mechanisms for managing all of the other things.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, the main concern I have with it is that I wouldn't necessarily want these things prescribed in the act, but it's more that these different groups can think about how these different issues get addressed by the sort of planning systems and coordination mechanisms that would enter the act and rather than being prescribed. But that could be written into the structure of how each of the things address this type of thing, that their role is not to prescribe climate adaptation into the act itself, but sort of decision criteria that goes there might be behind us, that they'll address that these mechanisms that are going to end up in the act are suitable to deal with those types of issues.
Yes, we completely agree and went through a number of variations of the pegs and the sequencing, and ultimately, I think primarily because of time constraints, decided to run this in parallel with.
Oh, I think they will have to be in parallel as well, because
Yeah.
there'll have to be feedback between the groups too, particularly back to whoever the planning and coordination group.
Right.
Because they're gonna have to learn from what the other groups are doing, but they're also gonna have to set a whole lot of prior stuff up before the other ones can consider it too. So naturally, it will have to be in parallel.
Right, and just because there's a separate peg, there would be a separate peg on planning systems and coordination, doesn't mean that the other issue area kind of focused pegs couldn't or shouldn't also talk about that. And I think we already have that drafted in a big scope of work, which we'll, discuss at the next.
Yeah, just the way it's presented at the moment, it sort of appears like they're kind of equal as part of a list. Whereas really, I think the planning coordination is quite a separate piece, and that is to go through.
Yeah.
To go to the next.
Agreed.
So,
Okay, so let's move on to announcements and have Claire go through what's coming up next. There you go.
So ending with announcements, ahead of our next meeting, the Department of Urban and Regional Planning will continue with their stakeholder interviews, community engagement, and thematic area briefs. And additional planning, coordination, and research will be completed to support the work of the PIGs. At our meeting in April, we're aiming for the end of April, we will finalize the guiding framework and form the PIGs. And then just as a refresher from the work plan, the PIGs will investigate critical long-range issues and recommendations to address those issues. The role of the current planning system in relation to the long-range issues, relevant metrics and benchmarks to measure progress, and the PIGs will investigate effective systems for planning, coordination, and implementation to address the identified issues. The PIGs will also identify thematic areas to support the formation of the PIGs, and this is also targeted for April.
All right, we've reached the end of our meeting. There we go. So I want to thank you all for your contributions, your help with us in gathering a variety of voices on how to update the Hawaiʻi State Plan Act. So we'll be sending out a notice of when the next meeting is, and shall we try to make it shorter or longer? Don't all speak at once. Okay, Michael has come up with a very reasonable comment. Depends on
I
that.
think I'd have to see the agenda, yeah. It'd be nice if it weren't directly over lunchtime though. Time to be awkward.
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll see what we can do about that.
All right.
Good comment. All right, any other comments? Humor is allowed. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And to Maui, stay dry.
We got here.